So I'd love to tell you a story from when I was very, very young, probably about that tall. Hands up if you've ever played the game, The Floor is Lava. You all played that game? So for those of you who are unfamiliar, so most have, some haven't, The Floor is Lava is a very simple game to play. You've got to get from one side of the room to the other as fast as possible. But you can't touch the floor because the floor is... Lava, exactly that. So what that means is you can throw a pillow on the floor, you can jump on the sofa, you've got to get from one side of the room to the other as quickly as possible. Now, I don't know about you, but running a business in 2026 kind of feels a bit like playing the game The Floor is Lava. Why? Because when you read the news and you hear all these news headlines about how AI is coming for everybody's jobs or businesses are under threat because of AI, it's all pretty scary stuff. But the purpose of this talk is to make things really simple. In fact, it's broken down into two parts. The first part is this. I'm going to explain in a very basic way how all these large language models, these LLM systems, actually work. And then the second part, I've got 3 really interesting use cases that you may not have come across before that you can use completely for free. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I am something of a nerd. I've come braced with my Star Trek cufflinks. So I thought, what could I do to make this a little bit more fun and engaging for everybody? So if you look at your chairs, you will find one of these. What we're going to do is play a game of AI bingo. Now, how's this going to work? Well, very simply, I'm going to come up with a whole bunch of different phrases as I'm going through this talk. What I would love you to do is please mark them off. So if you mark off a line, either going down or across, the first person who shouts out AI bingo is going to win a bottle of wine and some fat rascals from Betty's. Does that sound pretty good? Say again.
AI bingo.
AI bingo! You've got to get the line first. You've got to get the line. So, here's a question for everybody in the room. How many of us use tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini? A few of us, co-work, any others like that? Great, okay. When you hear about these things, they probably make you nervous. Sometimes, perhaps, because they're a mysterious black box and we don't know how they work. Well, to make an AI system work, it fundamentally comes down to 4 things. So let's start with the first. What I'd love you to do for a moment is imagine that you're inside a massive library. And this library is full of every single book that has ever been written. Now, in this library, you've got a little robot. And this little robot is going around this library, and it's picking up a book from the bookshelf, and it starts flicking through the pages. And then also, this robot in this amazing imaginary library is connected to the internet. So not only is it reading books, it's reading every scientific journal that's currently on the internet, every blog that has ever been written. But it's so special that if there is a YouTube out there with speech in it, this little robot has downloaded the entire transcript of whatever video it is, and it's trying to make sense of it. But here's the thing, this machine learning, it doesn't actually know, or doesn't even have a clue, what any of the words mean. What it's trying to do is figure out what actually makes a word, what makes a sentence, what makes a paragraph, what makes a chapter. So this is what's called machine learning. Now, I need to give you your first clue for AI bingo. This whole process is called a pattern engine. There we go. I can see you furiously marking this one off. Fantastic stuff. And by the way, if you do make a line, interrupt me at any time because that's part of the fun. So that's step 1. You've got this vast library of data. Step 2. Computers do not understand words in the way that we understand words. So what they need to do is turn all of these words into numbers. And then what it does, it clusters similar words that are near each other, close together. So for example, the word cat would be associated with the word dog. The word king would be near the word queen. So if you imagine a great big Excel spreadsheet with all of these words put into different columns, They've all been turned into numbers and they've been clustered close together. Now, what does that mean in practice and how does this work? Let me give you an example. So Google is now an AI-first company. That means if you type in a search query into Google, you're going to get an AI output, right? That's going to be the first thing that you see. So let's imagine that you type into Google, what fun things are there to do in Harrogate? It might suggest something like, go to Betty's Tea Room because they serve delicious fat rascals and amazing cups of tea. In that embedding space, oh, nearly knocked the wine over. In that embedding space, it will have grouped together those words and associated Betty's with fat rascals and cups of tea. Do you see what I mean? It's clustering those things closely together. Now that's important. If you have any questions later on about SEO, all that kind of stuff, I can tell you how these elements sort of come into play with all of that. You might have picked up on the word there, embedding space. That's what this is called. Step 3 in how to make a large language model work. This one requires some audience participation. What I would love you to do is just from your memory, fill in the end of this sentence. Are you ready? Shout it out. The cat sat on the mat. That's it, exactly. Now, how did you know that a cat sat on a mat?
Children's stories.
Children's stories, exactly. We've known since we were little that a cat sits on a mat, right? But here's the thing, a computer has no idea what a cat is. It's never stroked one, it's never taken one home. Has no idea what a mat is either. So how does a computer make sense of these different things? Well, inside these systems, inside the black box, so to speak, that powers LLMs, these large language models, is something called probability and prediction. What it's doing is it's trying to guess what the next word in the sentence should be. So, for example, a phrase like the cat sat on the mat, it will go back to that library of information. It will have seen how many, many times before that sentence usually ends with mat. And so what it does, it assigns various mathematical models as to which word it thinks should come next in the sentence. Now, does that sound similar to any technology that we had before AI? What do you think? Because it's very similar to one, autocomplete or predictive text. Who had a Nokia 3310? Oh, I love those things. They were indestructible bricks, weren't they? Now, even that had a form of predictive text. That would be using probability and prediction in order to make all these things work. So those are 3 technologies, and I think we kind of understand those. But there's a 4th one that ties all of this together, and this is the secret sauce. Now, this is a bit of a tricky concept, but pay close attention. Because what I was trying to do is think of an illustration that would make this work. If you imagine inside the software that powers things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all these other large language models, you have something that looks a little... AI bingo already! Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. That is a human being detecting a pattern. What is your name?
Malcolm.
Malcolm. There we go. Give him a big round of applause. Malcolm, you win some wine and some fat rascals. Lovely. Excellent. Oh, congratulations. Now, that doesn't mean that you guys have an excuse now to switch off. Where were we? We were inside the digital lasagna, weren't we? Now, how is AI like a lasagna? Well, if you think about a lasagna, right, it's made up of these different layers. You've got a creamy base, you've got some sauce, maybe some mince in there, and then a layer of pasta. And then it repeats, and it goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up. Well, imagine that, but software, okay? So the more complicated the prompt, or the more complicated the sentence that you want it to output, or paragraphs that you want it to output, the more layers of lasagna the software needs to go through. That's relatively simple for us to visualize. Now, Google actually invented this technology back in 2017. It's called the transformer model. Now, this is the thing that makes everything else possible. The really clever bit with this, though, is that they figured out using a mathematical technique called attention to figure out what words are the most important in a sentence. Take a look at this next slide. The dog chased the ball because it was red. The dog chased the ball because it was red. Now that's pretty simple for you and me to understand, right? We know what a dog is, we know what a ball is, we know what the color red is. But for a machine, it needs to know that the word ball relates to the word it. So how does it do that? Well, using this equation called attention, it can figure out that ball relates to the word it, and then it can form the rest of that sentence using probability and maths. So there we have it. Those are the ingredients that you need in order to make a large language model. And you know what? That saved me about 3 minutes of explanation because you've already solved AI bingo. That's fantastic. Cool. Okay. This is really important to understand at this point. These machines don't think the same way that you and I think. In fact, they don't think at all. They might give us the illusion that they're thinking when you're getting those text outputs. If you've heard of have you guys heard of the Turing test? That kind of stuff where if a machine can give you an output and convince you that it's human, well, they're just very convincing illusions. That's all it's doing. These machines quite literally don't have beliefs or awareness. They have no sense of what ethics are, no sense of what is right and what is wrong. That's where a human being comes into the mix. We're the ones that give things meaning. We are the ones that can apply ethics and stuff like that. Now, this might explain something that we've probably all seen. So for those of you who put your hands up earlier, who engage with tools like ChatGPT and other things, have you ever noticed how sometimes it gives you an output that is completely made up? Have you ever noticed that? Yeah? Can you give me an example of something that's been completely made up or a fact that it got wrong? I've got a couple for you, if needed. Here's one. A friend of mine the other day was at the train station, and they went on to ChatGPT to tell them what time is their next train, and they missed it. Not only did they miss their train, they asked it again, they went onto the wrong train, and instead of ending up in Leeds, they ended up in Manchester. Why you're relying on AI for something as simple as that, I don't know. Just look at the sign. But hey-ho, that is an example. Now, the reason why that happened, it's called a hallucination. It's because these machines don't understand the difference between what is real and what isn't real. Because it's all using probability to figure out what word should come next in a sentence. Now, these tools are getting better. They are trying to fact check themselves, but even then they will invent sources. They will just make stuff up. So that means that first free tip of this little exercise, don't just blindly copy and paste what you see from a large language model as an output. Always verify that the sources are 100% real. That makes sense? Cool. So let's just do a little recap of everything that we've covered so far. We know the basics of how these systems work. We've got that large language model. It's learning inside that vast library and all of these different books. Whether that's ethical or not, you know what, that's up to the lawyers to decide. After that, it assigns numbers to all of the words, and it clusters similar words close together. King and queen, cat and dog, all that kind of stuff. Betties and fat rascals. You get the idea. After that, it goes into that digital lasagna, and all of the prompts that we make go up through those digital layers of lasagna. And it has to pay attention to what word should come next in a sentence. Or I could just simplify it in a single sentence. Everything that an AI system does is simply looking to replicate patterns. Replicate patterns. Everything inside a large language model is a pattern. Now, as business owners, who I imagine the majority of us here today are business owners, would you agree that everything inside your business can also be a pattern? Cash flow is a pattern. Customer churn, sales is a pattern if you let it apply right. So what I'm going to do now is give you 3 different use cases that take this pattern engine, this way of being able to detect patterns and use patterns and apply them within your own business. What do you think? Does that sound like a good idea? Cool. I've broken them down into this. First one we're going to use is all about attack. Second one is an autopsy. And the third one is all about empathy. Does that sound intriguing? Okay, let's have a little look then. So this first one is called the Devil's Advocate. The Devil's Advocate. So most of the time when we use AI tools, if we just play with them as they standardly come, they're like a helpful little Labrador that's really eager to please, right? What this is turning that pattern on its head, and we're going to use it to help us identify problems within our business. So, make AI argue against your optimistic idea. Make AI argue against your optimistic idea. So just a little show of hands, how many of us are involved in some way with customers or sales? Yeah, so there's a few of us in the room, right? So we all have to, at some point, engage with a customer or engage in a sales conversation. Cool, that's great. What I'd like you to do now is think about that proposal that's laying on your desk that you haven't yet sent out. The one that you're probably going to send this week that you haven't finished quite polishing off. Okay, you've got it in mind? Great stuff. What I'd love you to do, when you get back, you can use this completely free of charge on the free subscription plan for ChatGPT, is use this prompt when you upload it. Demolish this sales presentation or whatever. Demolish this. Find every hole, predict every objection, argue the other side as hard as you possibly can. Ooh, that's intriguing, isn't it? Now, what kind of outputs might you get from an LLM with that? Well, let's imagine that you are a law firm. What you could do is use this, you could upload your case notes to this, and the output you would get is the opposing counsel's point of view. Or maybe you're an IT company. You upload what you think is an amazing cloud infrastructure and say, demolish this, put holes in it. How would you explain this? And it might say, okay, there is a vulnerability here within the code that you're using to upload everything. Does that make sense? Or, my personal favorite in the Devil's Advocate is this. Ask it to be your most difficult customer before you press send. Does that make sense? So instead of having it just as a friendly, happy little helper that thinks you're the best thing ever because you pay your subscription fees on time, use it to argue against you. Why? Because if you think back to that vast library of data, it already knows 1,000 failed pitches, and it can help you spot your failed pitch before you send it, so you can make modifications to it. Good idea? Cool. Number 2. This one's a little bit morbid. In fact, we call it the Pre-Mortem. Oh dear, sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? I can see a couple of you have switched off already. So what does this mean? Well, fast forward to the disaster. So let's imagine this. Imagine you've got a new business concept that you've come up with, and you've put the business plan together, you've got the marketing plan, you've got all of those different things. Upload this to your large language model of choice and use this prompt. Fast forward to a disaster. Sorry, it's a year from now, and this project completely flopped. Write me the story of why. Write me the story of why. What it can do, it can look at all the different variables within your business plan, your marketing plan, all these types of things, and it can poke holes in it. Now, I have a second business, so obviously I've got My Digital Hero, a little marketing agency, but I also have Treasured Moments. At the minute, I'm in the depths of making an app for it. Now, I have spent weeks of time putting together this master coding document that I'm going to pass on to my developers, copywriters, make all of this come together. And I thought, just for the heck of it, I'm going to practice what I preach and use my pre-mortem check. What it found was startling. I was able to save about £15,000 to £20,000 of development time that would be spent on them as opposed to in my back pocket. Why? It had spotted some regulation things that I'd completely forgotten about because I was far too optimistic as I was putting together my business plan. So try it. It works. It's pretty darn awesome.
Do you think they did that on HS2, Sam?
Do you think they did that on HS2? Yeah, that would have been a good idea, wouldn't it? Maybe we'd have some trains. Maybe we could get the current trains to run on time. So number 3 is my personal favorite, and I call it the Translator. Now, I don't know what you think about this. Tell me if you agree or disagree later. But do you think people these days lack empathy? It seems to be that these days people are becoming less in tune with each other. Maybe that's because of social media, maybe that's because of things like that, of that nature. Well, isn't it important for us as business owners to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of our customers, to see things through their eyes? Well, that's what this is all about. So the next time you have a sales pitch or you're putting together your nice new A5 leaflet that you're going to hand out to people, upload it to your large language model of choice and use this prompt. Read this as the person, not my assistant. React honestly. Where do you lose interest? Where do you get confused or stop trusting me? Quote the exact lines. That's an interesting one, isn't it? So, if you're an IT company, perhaps you've put together a really good brochure, and it might be really good for somebody who's technical, but write it as though you're, in that prompt, write it as though you're somebody who hates technology, but you've got a big budget, right? What can you do to de-jargonize everything that's in there? Get it to scan through it. It will have seen the pattern hundreds, thousands of times before of the failed pitches. See it through their eyes. You can fix it before you send it to anybody. I thought of one for Workwell. Try this one. Read this as someone who's toured 5 vibrant, flexible workspaces this week and can no longer tell them apart. Sound like a good idea? It doesn't matter what your business is. These 3 prompts you can use for anything. What do you think? Do you think that's pretty useful? It's a different way of thinking about AI, isn't it? Because we're so used to just simply using it as a handy little Labrador helper. Cool. So the question now is, where do human beings fit into all of this? Where do human beings fit into the grand vision of everything? We've all read the headlines. AI is coming for our jobs. X thousand people laid off. AI is replacing all software developers. You don't need an accountant. You don't need law firms to write your contracts. Blah, 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 blah. We've all seen it, right? Well, can I give you a real story, something that happened to me about 6 months ago? I went out to visit a business who had used AI to write their marketing plan. They'd given it their budget, and it had come out with various different descriptions of what they can do, including social media posts and all these types of things. It was pretty good. I was reading through it and I was thinking, oh, crap, what am I going to do now? Right, so I was reading through this thing, but there was a line in it that absolutely struck me cold. It said, in your industry, fear-based headlines outperform all others. Fear-based headlines outperform all others. Any guesses as to what the industry was? Insurance? Good guess. Any others? Food? Yeah, food. That'd be a good one. Any others? News? Yeah, news. You can see that work. Fear-based. It was a vet. It was a vet. Do you want to know what the advert was? Vaccinate your cat before it's too late. That was the suggestion that the AI had come out with. Vaccinate your cat before it's too late. Was the pattern wrong? No, the pattern wasn't wrong. It had detected something really accurate. Because if you have a cat, presumably you want to look after it, you want to make sure it has a long, happy, healthy life, you no doubt want to make sure it's vaccinated. But the question is, at that point, if you were to just publish exactly what the AI had said for you to do, are you building trust or are you building fear? And that's really at the point where human beings come into the equation for everything. That is what I would call leadership. That's where all of that comes in. If you're a software developer right now, it's quite possible that you might be facing redundancy of some kind. But from everybody that I've spoken to who is in that industry, The trouble with AI used to make code is that nobody knows how that code was made or written. So there might be vulnerabilities within it. The point is, you always need to have a human being in the loop with everything. So do you want to build trust or fear? Well, brand, ethics, leadership, that is all about human beings. That's where we come into the equation. So what is AI? Well, if we could sum it up in just that single sentence again, it is a way of detecting and creating patterns. But if AI is the pattern engine, human beings are the meaning engine. We can apply meaning to things. AI can tell you what works, but human beings can tell you what matters. And that difference is leadership. What do you think? Is that right? So the floor might be lava, but hopefully after the last 20 minutes or so, we know exactly where we need to stand. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.